So I'm sharing the screen to chapter 21, verse 22. So in the English, it just looks like just an extra verse, but in the Torah scroll, if you have the Stone edition, you'll see that in the Torah scroll, it's really a new paragraph. And again, it sounds like a story that's not so consequential, but there probably is a lot of significance to the story. The question is what it is. Also a story that makes its way into the reading of Rosh Hashanah. So in that sense, most Jews are in shul, they end up hearing this reading because the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we want to read about the birth of Isaac. So we start at chapter 21, but the reading goes all the way to chapter 22. So we read this as well on Rosh Hashanah. Okay, what do we read about? We read about a peace treaty. How bad is a peace treaty? Can't be too bad, right? So that's what we have 22. Now it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Pichol, his general, said to Abraham, saying, God is with you in all that you do. In other words, they realize that God is with Abraham, so you want to be on Abraham's side, right? In the geopolitical environment, you have to choose which side are you going to be on. So they say, we want to be on Abraham's side. So that's what they recognize. So what do they tell him? They tell him as follows, and now, swear to me here by God that you will not lie to me or to my son or to my grandson. According to the kindness that I have done with you, you shall do with me and with the land wherein you have sojourned. In other words, we want a treaty, but not just a treaty. These guys are smart. They don't make just a treaty. They don't just make a treaty for himself, but he also makes a treaty for son, grandson. 3 generations. According to the kindness that I have done with you, you shall do with me and with the land wherein you have sojourned. And Abraham said, I will swear. Okay, wonderful. Right? Make a peace treaty, everyone's happy, everyone's swearing, we're gonna treat each other with respect. Now comes a very surprising verse. The surprising verse is that Abraham rebukes Abimelech. The king comes to make peace with me. What would I say? Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So he said, I'll make peace. But first, he asserts himself and he says, but your people are doing things that are wrong. And he speaks up for himself in the context of peace. So that's very interesting. Verse 25, and Abraham contended with Abimelech. Contended me, I don't know what contended means. I got to check it the dictionary. But I guess it means like there's some tension. But in Hebrew, hochiach is to rebuke. Right? Lehochiach is to rebuke. Abimelech, Abraham rebukes Abimelech about the well of water that the servants of Abimelech had forcibly seized. Okay? So Abraham says, I'm happy to make peace with you. I just want you to know that your people are stealing, not stealing. In Hebrew, there's a word for stealing. There's a word, in Hebrew, there's 2 words, Geneva and Gezela. Ganav and Gazlan. Ganav means when you take something away from someone else in secret, in hiding. I break into your house at night, I steal. I come to your field at night, I take the water, or I move the fence. If I steal, stealing is bad. There's another term which is worse. Oh, I'm not sure which is worse. There's another term which is Gazlan, which means I take it forcibly in the open. I'm not afraid of anybody. I'm not afraid of the police. I'm not afraid of anybody. So Abimelech's people, they don't steal at night. They don't steal in hiding. They forcibly seize Abimelech's Abraham's well. And Abraham rebukes Abimelech and he says, your people are forcibly seizing my water.
Surmount, he wanted to surmount. Abraham, I looked up contend.
Yeah.
Can mean surmount, overcome a difficulty.
Right, interesting. Challenge, right.
Right, it can also mean fighting it.
Right, so it's fighting, it's dispute, but
it can mean he did to surmount the problem.
Right. So I wonder how they translate it here.
It says reproof leads to peace.
Oh, so that's a good point. That's a good point. Peace is not necessarily, okay, that's a good point. So we'll talk about that in a second. But I just want to see how they translate it here. 25 in the Art Scroll. Then Abraham disputed with Abimelech regarding the well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized. So they say disputed. I don't think that's the translation. I think the simple translation is hochiach. Lehochiach is to rebuke. That's what I think. I'm sorry? Rashi says that. Okay, good. Amy, thank you. So Rashi's on my side, or I'm on Rashi's side. No, I'm wrong. Rashi says, he argued with him about that. So that's why the article's translation, the question is what the word means. Okay, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is he comes and he speaks up and he says, your people are taking my water. Now, water is the most important resource if you are in that region. You're basically in the desert. South of Israel, you're in the desert. You'll see later with Isaac, you find water, it's like striking gold, right? Literally, that's what makes the news. It's in all the headlines that Abraham says, you want to make peace with me, it's wonderful, but your people are taking my water. So what does Abimelech say? We already know Abimelech. What did Abimelech says? What does he say when there's trouble? I had no idea. Very unlikely he had no idea, but that's what he says.
It didn't say that. It said Abraham rebuked him because Abimelech ignored the violence.
Yeah.
It didn't say anything about the water.
No, it says the well of water. Look at 25. And Abraham contended with Abimelech about the well of water that the servants of Abimelech had forcibly seized. Verse 25, right? And then Abraham's disputed with Abimelech regarding the well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized. Had seized doesn't sound like a bad word. Seized, the government seizes. Maybe it's a good word. In Hebrew, asher gazlu. Gazlu means theft, but it's worse than. In some ways, it's worse than theft. It's theft out in the open. It means you're the sheriff. It's the Wild West. Nobody can stop you, so you're not afraid to hide the thefts. By the way, I don't want to get into it right now, but which one is worse? What's worse, someone who steals in the open or someone who steals at night when nobody's looking? So it's interesting that the Torah says the law is if you steal when nobody's looking, if you're a ganav, not a gazlan, if you're a ganav, if you steal when no one's looking, then you have to pay double. But if I steal, I walk into your house and I'm the town bully and I come in and I take your stuff, I only have to pay back once. I don't have to pay back double. In some ways, it's more undermining to society, the people who steal in secret, because that undermines trust. And knowing the problem is one problem. When the thief is in hiding, in some ways, that's worse. Even if you can, but everyone knows it's wrong, right? Oh, so there's this. So that's the second thing. Amy says. Rashi says that about the guy. He's in some sense. I think Rashi says that about here. Yeah, not the person who steals at night or in the dark, who steals when nobody's looking, in some sense is worse because in addition to stealing money, he's also showing God that he's less concerned with God than with other people. If someone else was here, I wouldn't steal. God is looking, well, I don't care about God. The thief that steals in the open, he's not afraid of God and he's not afraid of people. It's not as offensive, right? Being afraid of people and not of God is more offensive to God than not being afraid of anybody. Okay, if you're not afraid of God, at least don't be afraid of people. Okay, so the rabbi said that you should go home and steal in the open. No, I didn't say that. But in any case, this is all I'm trying to say is that the translation here is weak, is not as strong. Forcibly seized. In Hebrew, gazlu, they stole. I don't know if there's an English word for ligzo, which is to steal like with force. In other words, we're not being afraid. Okay, Abimelech, we know this from last story. Abimelech, whenever he's approached, he says, I have no idea. I had no idea. Well, is ignorance a defense? If you should have known, your people are doing things, maybe you should have known, but we're not going to get into that right now. We discussed that in the past. Abimelech said, I did not know who did this thing. Neither did you tell me, nor did I hear of it until today. Okay, Abraham took flocks and cattle and gave them to Abimelech, and they both formed a covenant. They made a covenant. Now, of the flocks and cattle, I never realized this. I always thought, you'll see the next verse. Next verse is 28. And Abraham placed 7 ewe lambs by themselves, 7 lambs by themselves. Does that mean that he gave them, sounds like he gave the flocks and the cattle, Abraham gave Abimelech much more than 7. Of the flocks that he gave him, he takes 7 sheep. Abimelech says, what are these sheep? And Abimelech said to Abraham, what are these 7 ewe lambs which you have placed by themselves? And he said, for these 7 ewe lambs you shall take from my hand in order that it would be for me a witness that I dug this well. Therefore he named that place Beersheba, for there they both swore. And they formed a covenant in Beersheba, and Abimelech and Pichol his general arose, and they returned to the land of the Philistines. So there's a play here. The word Sheva, Be'er Sheva, the word Sheva is very close, is exactly the word 7. But the word 7 is the same root as the word shvuah, oath. So he takes 7 sheep and gives them to Abimelech. Why does he give him 7 sheep? He gives him 7 sheep. So there should be testimony that I dug this well. And that's why he calls it Be'er Sheva, because of the shvuah. Kisham nishbeu shnehem, because they swore. So it's interesting. The 7, because you could say, if I stop an Israeli in the street and say, what's Be'er Sheva? Most likely he'll tell me, because it's a big city in Israel, Be'er Sheva. I think it's the 5th largest city in Israel, capital of the Negev. If I stop an Israeli in the street and I say, what's Be'er Sheva? Most likely he'll tell me the well of 7. And that's a legitimate translation, because that's what Sheva means. But it's clear that in the Torah says it's not the well of 7, it's the well of oath, right? Well, maybe I'm wrong. 31. Therefore, in any place, Be'er Sheva, for there they both swore. So there's a play between 7 and oath. It's the same word. So we'll deal with that in a second. Be'er is well. Because remember, he spoke up about the well. And a well is the way you get permanence. Because if you're living in the south of Israel in the desert without a well, you're out of business. In other words, you can't be there an extended period of time. You can't, right? So you need the water. The well of either the well of 7 or the well of oath. It's the same word. Sheva can mean 7 for the seven sheep that he gave, or 7 could be, or Sheva can be the oath. Thank you, Mishka. And then finally, you get to the verse 33, and he planted an Ashel in Be'er Sheva. What's an Ashel? So there's 2 opinions in Rashi. I think an Ashel is a inn or an orchard. In any case, he plants an inn or an orchard in Beersheba, and he called there in the name of the Lord, the God of the world. And Abraham dwelt in that land for the Philistines for many days. So he's there for a long time. And next chapter, we begin the story of the binding of Isaac. Okay, so what's the story here? Why do I need to know about this peace treaty? Does it advance the story? Does it not advance the story? Does it help us understand the binding of Isaac? Does it not help us understand the binding of Isaac? Does it connect it to the previous story, to the later story? There's many ways to read this, but that's the story that we want to address before we move to the next story, which is the binding of Isaac. That's the next story. That's the next story. Why does God test Abraham? So just briefly, why does God test Abraham? That's really the next story. But testing is a way of allowing the person to develop their inner character and their inner potential. If I am not tested, then I am not going to reach my potential. Why do I go to the gym? I go to the gym to lift weights. Don't worry, I don't. I should, but I don't. But theoretically, if I went to the gym and the trainer gives me weights, it's making it hard for me. Why does it make it hard for me? Because what he wants to do, he wants that my muscles should become stronger. If you don't put on the tension, the muscles are not going to become stronger. And that's true in every area of life. So we look at a test as an obstacle in all areas, because we come into this world and what we want is comfort, because comfort is comfortable. But comfort is not the way you develop the potential that God gives us. And that's why a test is a way of developing the inner core. And that's why everybody is tested to some degree. The soul's entering the body, according to the Kabbalah, is the biggest test, because it places it by definition in a challenging environment. And why does God test Abraham? Really, why does God test every soul? Every minute of life is a difficult challenge for the soul. So why does God do it? God does it because that's how the soul could develop itself. When it's in heaven, before the soul descends into the world, then it's connected to God and it's connected to holiness, but it's not developing itself. It's not growing.
The first time they ever talk about God testing anybody.
The first time the word nisayon is used, yes, the first time the word is used, even though we believe that, according to the sages, this is the 10th test of Abraham. In other words, it's not the first time the test happens. There are many tests, but the first time the test is used, because in some sense this is everything is a test. In other words, Adam fails the test in a sense, Adam. But the point here is that this is the culmination, the ultimate test. But we'll get to that in a minute. Seth is jumping ahead to the exciting parts. What we have to do is look at the part that seems dry and figure out what is it doing here. right? It's not just informational to tell us, oh, Abraham, by the way, if you're interested, Abraham signed a peace treaty. No, yeah, he signed a peace treaty, but what is that? What is the significance of that? And how does that help the story that we're discussing? Because remember, Bahi Baitahi, it happened at that time. And then right after that, if you look at the binding of Isaac, chapter 22, Bahi, and it happened after these things. After which things? There's a debate. Which things are we talking about? But in some sense, it comes right after the previous story, which is after the treaty. So what's the treaty? So one way to think about it is Abraham has a promise from Hashem, basically two major promises that he got from Hashem many decades earlier. Already when he was 75 years old, when God tells him to go to Israel, it's basically two promises. What are the two promises? Children and the land of Israel. That's the two major promises. There were other promises that everybody will bless themselves through him. In other words, they'll get fame. Agada Shmecha, make your name great. Everybody will bless themselves with you. So it's a good reputation, which is nice to have. But the two main promises, I think, were the land of Israel and descendants. Now, Abraham was living many, many decades with just the promise, without the fulfillment of those two major promises, right? He doesn't have children for at least 25 years. Well, he has 15 years later, 11 years later, he has Yishmael, but God keeps reiterating that no, Yishmael is not the fulfillment of the divine promise, okay? So for many decades, him and Sarah do not have children, and there is no evidence that Abraham has any settling in the land of Israel. I mean, he's living there, but living there doesn't mean this becomes your land, right? If I walk into Manhattan and God says, this is your land, and just because I'm sitting on 47th Street doesn't mean that it's my land, right? There's nothing. What do we see that we don't see anywhere that we're moving closer to the fulfillment of Abraham's promises.
But that's not what's important.
That's not what's important, right? But finally, right over here, finally, the promises start becoming fulfilled. Okay. Now, what does that do? What does that mean? So there's two ways to read it. What I'm going to try to say, at least is one way to look at it. This actually makes the binding of Isaac more difficult. When you have no promise, when you were promised and it has not been fulfilled, okay. When finally, after decades, things start working out, and then you have a challenge that undermines your hope when the hope started already taking place. That becomes more tricky. So what do I mean that things start working out? First of all, the king of the region wants to make peace with you. Okay, what does that tell you? That tells you that the king of the region understands that you have permanence in this land. The people recognize Abraham as someone who's going to be here, not just be here himself, but also generations to come. He says, doesn't want a treaty between Abraham and Abimelech. That's common. People live together, they make treaties all the time. He says, I want a treaty with you, your children, your grandchildren. I want a treaty. I want you to promise me for my children and grandchildren. Now, Avram is not going to be here with Abimelech's great-grandchildren. He obviously is making a treaty between Avram's family. Why Avram's family? Because finally, we now have Isaac growing up. So now Abimelech recognizes two things. Abimelech recognizes that Abraham is a permanent fixture in the land of Israel and is going to have power. And Hashem is with him. That's the commandment. That's the promise. All people of the earth will bless themselves with you. In other words, you'll have a reputation that people will consider you blessed. And they'll bless themselves saying, I wish I were like Abraham. And he recognizes that Abraham has children. And he recognizes that I better make peace with this guy because he's settling here in the land. So finally, in this seemingly just a regular story about Abimelech trying to make peace, he doesn't have to make, in other words, they're not in a fight, but he wants a treaty, right? So it's not just a story about a treaty, just to figure out what happened, how Abraham spent his time. But this is a story, really, what the Torah is signaling to you, that finally, after all these decades, everything that Hashem promised to Abraham, which he needed faith, because he didn't see the fulfillment of those promises for many decades, finally, he reaches the place where he sees, I see the fulfillment of a divine promise. And that's the significance of this oath. Now, of this treaty. Now, that may or may not make it easier for him to that actually may intensify the test in the next step. Because if I have nothing, it's easy to sacrifice nothing, right? But all of a sudden you see the fulfillment of the promise. So your hope starts being fulfilled. And now you're asked to take Isaac, who will be the fulfillment of the promise of making Abraham into a great nation. And you're going to sacrifice Isaac once you see already everything is turning good, right? You finally reach the point where you actually see the fulfillment of the promises. And now the test undermines that promise. So it could be that, again, I don't know, you can read it in both ways. You can say, well, now he trusts God, so he trusts that everything will be fine at the end. You can read it any way you want, but I'm just saying this story of a treaty is not just the story. The story of the treaty is significant because here is really the beginning of the fulfillment of the promise of the promises, multiple promises that God gave to Abraham. And Abraham has only been hoping for them all these years, trusting that they will happen, but he didn't experience it. We don't have like I said, we have no evidence that anybody considered Abraham's presence in the land of Israel permanent, or anyone considered it his land up to this point. Up to this point, here you have the treaty, and that represents the settlement. And that also gets you the end of the verse. He plants an orchard, or he plants an inn, whatever the case is. Permanence, right? Till now, Abraham is traveling throughout Israel. Even when we have no indication that he plants anything. Even if you say planted a tent, but the word plant indicates permanence, and he lives in the same place for many years. I mean, might be many days. Many days can be many days, can be many years. Here they say it's many years, but Yamim Rabim could be many years or many days. But the point is, it's clearly indicating permanence. Okay, go ahead, Vicky, please.
Well, I had a question. So maybe that's, first of all, maybe this story also is a test. If it is a test, the Abraham picked the right time for rebuke, because it's a good time to rebuke after you are recognized in the region. And the second point is that maybe it just gave Abraham more confidence that his son Isaac will be saved the last minute, so that the same way that the first son was saved.
Okay, listen, like I told you, I'm laying out the story here. You can read it both ways, that it's actually making the test easier or making the test harder. You could take which story you want. All I'm trying to do is tell you of Abraham, what this passage means. And it seems that this passage means that Abraham starts seeing the fulfillment of the promises. Now, what does that do to somebody like Abraham? And how does that affect the test that follows? Does it make it easier or harder? That's a subjective question. That's up to you. But I think that this is the state of frame of mind that Abraham is in. If you stop him and say, "No, you got a whole list of promises from God. Did they actually happen?" So before this passage, before this paragraph, he would say, "No, I'm very hopeful that it's going to happen." After this passage, he could say, "I already see the fulfillment of the promise, the beginning of the fulfillment." Right? Now, what does that do? If the fulfillment starts happening and then God asks you to uproot all hope for the future, does that make it easier or harder? That's your decision. That you decide. But that's the state of mind.
Right.
Yeah, he was the king of Palestine. Yes.
So this was still going to be an ongoing problem for many years.
Okay, you know the history, and you know that we have a hard time with the Philistines for many centuries. So we'll address that in a second. Go ahead, Dr. Beth. We can't. I don't know if you're muted. Yeah, you're still muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry. So my question is, was that intentional that he, when you make a deal, when you make an oath, you lay it out all in advance, and then you say, okay, I agree to these terms, and you agree to that terms. So how do we understand that he sort of said, oh, wait, by the way, just want to bring up the issue of the well. Like, why
okay.
is
this is a point. Why is he bringing up the well? So this leads to a broader question. Some people say as follows. This is more of a modern reading, but I'm going to put it out there. Who do you make peace with? Who does Abimelech make peace with? Does Abimelech make peace with someone who's a nice guy? Or does Abimelech make peace with somebody who is strong-willed or can exhibit some strength? So some people would read that Abimelech does not make peace with Abraham until he's impressed with his strength of character. And where does he see that? Where does he see that? Because again, if you look at the beginning of the paragraph, chapter 21, verse 22, it says, "Vayhi ba'etahi." At that time, Abimelech and Pichol, general of his legion, said to Abraham, God is with you. What's at that time? At that time, we assume was right after the previous story. What's the previous story? Sending away Yishmael. If you could send away your son Yishmael, remember, who's Abraham? Abraham's a man of kindness. He basically is running a free hostel. He's running a free soup kitchen, feeding everybody. He's a very nice guy. You'll give him the reward to the nice citizen, but you're not going to make a treaty with him because what's it going to help you to have a nice guy on your side, right? The treaty you make with somebody who's strong.
Maybe his faith was just
Maybe,
so unbelievable.
maybe. But when does Abimelech show up?
And that, the second thing was kindness.
Maybe, but I'm just giving you one reading. One reading is it happened at that time. What at that time? What happened right before that story? He sends away Ishmael. So one way to read this is when Abraham exhibits strength, that's when people say you can send away your son. You're a strong character. You want you on our side. Now, when Abraham comes, Abraham understands this dynamic. Abraham understands if you're going to make a treaty and you want to have equal footing with the person you're making a treaty with, don't come in projecting weakness, even if he's the king and I'm a nomad, I'm a nobody, right? If you want a treaty, you have to project strength. And projecting strength is not just saying, oh, you know, your people are stealing my well, but hoichiach, rebuke. Look how the power dynamic changes, right? We're equals with the king. Avram is a nobody. I mean, he's a famous guy. He's a nice guy, but he doesn't have any political power. This guy this guy shows.
He was testing Abimelech.
Maybe, but let's see what happens. Abimelech shows up to the treaty. Who does he show up with?
Nice.
He shows up with his war minister. What is he doing? He's projecting strength. I got an army. Who are you? You're a nobody, right? Why does he bring it? He could have brought his what do they have? His Secretary of State, right? You're the king. You're showing up to the meeting. Who do you bring? The ministers you bring is basically the power you're trying to project. You're trying to project peace. You're trying to project strength. Now, it's very good to know you're sitting in 2020, what are we, 2022? I have to update. We're in 2022, and Abimelech's minister is Pichol. Very good, Mazel Tov. Now I know the name of the minister of Abimelech. Why do I need to know this? Why is it in the Torah? No, it's significant. He showed up with Pichol. What's Pichol? Rashi says Pichol. Pichol, the mouth of everybody. But the Medrash says, I think, if I remember correctly, everyone's talking about this general. This guy had the best army in the region. And he shows up to a treaty with his defense minister, basically trying to show strength. Abraham says, you want to make a peace treaty? We have to be equal. Want to be equal? I will project strength. How do you project strength to the superpower? You rebuke the superpower. And that's what Abraham does, which shows you that Abraham is learning to do what we've been saying he's been learning to do this entire parsha, which is Abraham is kind, but sometimes if you want to succeed in this world, you have to project gevura, strength, discipline, and that's what he does. I want to say one more point. They have a treaty. Abraham gives Abimelech sheep. Why is Abraham giving Abimelech sheep? Let's make a treaty. I give you sheep, you give me goats. Why is Abraham the one gifting? So you could say Abraham, the simple reading is Abraham is sort of showing Abimelech honor. If the president of the superpower of the world, I don't know who you think the superpower is nowadays. I don't want to get political. I was going to say, okay, I'm not getting political here. But if you think there's a superpower, if you think there's a superpower, a president of a superpower coming to you, and you give him gifts because you honor him. But some people say, no, it's not what's happening. If to the contrary, the giver in any dynamic, the giver in any relationship, the giver is the one who's projecting strength. If I give you means I don't need you, you need me. Say the commentaries, at least some of them, that if you read a few pages earlier, when Sarah was taken from to Abimelech in chapter 20, on the stone, it's page 95, but it's chapter 20, verse 14. The verse says, so after he realizes that Sarah is Abraham's wife and he should not have taken her because God intervenes. So Abimelech took flocks and cattle and servants and maidservants and gave to Abraham, and he returned his wife Sarah to him. So he gives him a lot of possessions, flocks, cattle, servants, and maidservants. And it was supposed to be a big deal. So everyone should realize that he's honoring Abimelech. So at least one commentator, I forget his name, I forget who it is, I have to check out my notes here, says 1 second. Abraham says, I don't receive from you. If I receive from you, then I'm weaker. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give you everything back. Now we're equal. Now let's do business. So in that sense, it's a story of when does Abimelech, it's a story of strength. It's a story of Gevurah. And so you see here that when does Abimelech and Pichol show up to make peace? When he projects internal strength. He's not a soft, kind person. Not that you shouldn't be a soft, kind person, but that's not what Abimelech is going to respect.
But he knew Abraham knew that he had God
Yes.
with him.
Yes.
And when you know that, you don't need anything.
Yeah. You don't need anything, and you have internal strength. Yeah.
Just to make the thing work out okay.
Yes.
You really don't need it.
You're right. But it's all I was trying to. You're right. So Abraham is in a position of strength, also because he knows God is on his side. Correct. I agree with you. But it's just interesting to read that. You read the story and you don't think about these details of why is this unilateral? Why is I'm giving sheep, not just 7? 7 is just for the oath. But before the 7 sheep, he gives them a hope. He gives them sheep. We don't know how many. So he says, I'm not the recipient here. You want to make peace with me, no problem. If you're going to make peace with me, understand we're equals.
Also, what's interesting is in 20, when Abimelech gives all that stuff, he says, here's my land before you, etc.
Yeah, but that means
So
I'm giving the land. But it means,
I think Abimelech back in 20 is saying, here, I'm a big shot. Here's
no,
my
I'm the
land.
benevolent. I'm the giver.
Right.
Yeah, you could live
But
on
now
my.
I think Abraham's renegotiating this. Now.
Right.
Say, no,
Right. So Amy says that when Abimelech says, I give you permission to live here. That's really what's happening in chapter 20. Abimelech is saying, I'm here, I'm giving you gifts, and you can live wherever you want in my estate.
Yeah.
Right? But living there means that it's your estate, that it's Abimelech's estate. Here, Abimelech shows up, and now Abraham wants to project that he's the owner. So what does he do? He says, your people are taking my water. It's my water. And what does Abimelech say? Abimelech doesn't say, well, it's my water. Be thankful that I'm letting you stick around. He says, no, I didn't know. Whether or not he did or didn't know is a different question. But the point here is that he's acknowledging the shift in the dynamic between the two of them. So what does this mean? Should you make peace or not? Well, only make peace at a place of strength. Now, the rabbis, Amy mentioned this earlier, we're going to have trouble with the Philistines for many, many generations, for many centuries. Until Solomon's times, basically, we're suffering with the Philistines. And here, the Medrash basically says that it's not such a great idea that Abraham should have made a treaty with Abimelech. Why? Because the land was given to him. What does Abimelech say? I'm going to be loyal. What does Abraham say? I'm going to be loyal to you and your descendants and your children and grandchildren. The sages say it's not really 3 generations; it's really 7 generations. Because even though he said 3, this is the way you see the lawyer. I said we have at least one lawyer here. If you're going to make a contract, you have to read the fine print. So he says like this. He says, so the simple interpretation is 3 generations, right? Look at verse in the stone. It's 99 page 99, verse 23. If you want to look at the screen here, if you want to look at the screen, it's 23, right? Chapter 21, verse 23, right here. I'm highlighting it. And now swear to me here by God that you will not lie to me or my son or my grandson. Me, my son, grandson. This is 3 generations. You'll see in a minute in the Medrash say, I think it's 7 generations. I'll take a peek. Why so? Nin, here they translated me, my son, and my grandson. It's not really what it says. Li is me. Nin is Nin in modern Hebrew is great grandchild, and Nechti is grandchild. Verse 23. Chav Gimel, right? Take an oath from me, Belahim and God. If you will lie to me, meaning not be loyal to me. Ula Nini, modern Hebrew. Nin is great grandchild. Ula Nechti is grandchild. In other words, he's skipping generations. He's not talking about my child. He's talking, go straight to great grandchild. So this could be read as 7 generations. I'm going to open the Medrash in a second because I don't want to speak from memory. But here, the bottom line is that according to the Medrash, at least some interpretations of the Medrash, some opinions of the Medrash, Abraham makes a treaty with Abimelech for too many years, too many generations, 3 or 7, depending how you ask. And this is problematic.
Sojourn is a temporary,
Yeah.
temporary in a land. It's not a permanent.
Correct. So who says sojourned? Abimelech says sojourned. Abimelech says you're going to make peace with the land that you sojourned, right? But Abraham doesn't call himself a sojourner. Abraham says, my water, don't touch my water. And I'm going to rebuke you, and I'm going to give you the gifts, right? So this is always an interesting.
Abraham always had the power. And
You have to.
Abimelech is just trying as best as he can to maintain his position.
So you're saying Abraham has the power. So this is the question that right today, today that modern thinkers understand. If you look at any situation, and it's not so easy to find out what is the power dynamic in this relationship, and it's important to understand it. In any situation you are, who's the power, who's the powerless? It's not so simple always. Sometimes the more powerful is powerful. Sometimes the weaker person actually has the more power. It's not so simple to soft power. So this is about getting the power, having the power, believing in your own power, and also projecting power. Make sure the person talking to you understands what you understand.
So the question is, why did God test Abraham? I still don't understand, but we're not up to that.
We're not up to that. God tests it. Yeah, we're not up to that now. Not yet. Let me just read the Medrash for a second here.
Abraham's got it over there. Now he's tested. Maybe Abraham's getting tired.
Okay, the very negative medrash. It's very sad medrash. We'll get to that in a second. Before we get to that medrash, I'm going to read another medrash. Very nice medrash. Abimelech rebuked Avram rebuked Abimelech. Says the medrash as follows. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina says, Yossi the son of Chanina says, rebuke brings to love. As the verse says in Proverbs, rebuke the wise and he will love you. Right? In other words, where does love come from? How does love? So the conventional interpretation of love is, if I love you, we're going to ignore all the difficulties we have between us. So as the Medrash, that's not the way you're going to get to love. So again, my interpretation was more negative, that Abraham is here to project power. But the Medrash says that's not the projecting power, maybe that too. What he's trying to do is create a genuine relationship of love. How do you get love? Not by ignoring the difficulties, but by rebuking. That's what King Solomon says. King Solomon got it from Abraham. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, says the Medrash, which says any love that kol ahava, any love that does not have rebuke with the love is not love. If you have a relationship, a loving relationship, and the person that you love never rebukes you, it's a wonderful thing, but it's not love. Very interesting.
Respect is love.
Yes, yeah, but rebuke, love means part of the dynamic of love is that you could rebuke the other person, you could I don't want to say criticize, but you could rebuke and say and point out that they're doing something wrong, and the person won't get defensive because the person knows it's coming from a loving place. And like we understand that rebuke is actually, Hayem Yom, the Hasidic teachings say that you should love rebuke because that's the way you're going to grow, right? But I don't want rebuke. But not if it's coming from the person you love, right? And not if you take it. It's an art to rebuke. It's also an art to receive rebuke, because the natural response would be when I am rebuked, I go on the defensive, and what happens? Ultimately, the person that's going to lose out from that is myself, because I will not grow without critique. Anything I do. I remember the first time I wrote something and I asked someone to look it over for me, and they didn't like it. I was totally hurt. And the reality is that they were helping me. And if the person would say, wow, it was so wonderful, that you wouldn't grow. And it's in every area of life. So it goes against our nature. But this is what this Medrash is saying, that when the guy is coming to you, Abimelech's coming to you, why are you rebuking him? Give him some cake, give him some coffee, and be nice. Arabs do black coffee; they still do. Give him some black coffee. They didn't have coffee back then, but you know what I'm saying. Be friendly. Let's hide the differences, and we'll live happily ever after. No, you want love, you have to have rebuke. Go ahead, Seth.
I just figured out why God tested him.
Okay, why did God test him? If you finally figured it out, let me know. I want to hear too.
Because really, Abraham did nothing that God could rebuke.
Okay.
He was perfect.
Okay.
So the only way to get Abraham to grow
is
was
to
do this thing with.
Makes sense.
That's the only way he could have done, because Abraham was perfect in God's eyes, apparently.
Okay.
So that's why he did that.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not there. There's 70 ways of reading the Torah. What do I know? I just want to finish this Midrash because the first guy said, any love that has no rebuke is not love. Reish Lakish says, rebuke brings to peace. Avraham rebukes Abimelech. His opinion is, any peace that has no rebuke is not peace. So this is a very deep dynamic. What does it mean that I have a peaceful relationship? What does it mean that I have a loving relationship? It doesn't mean that I have a safe space, that nobody's going to rebuke me. Today, everybody wants safe space. They want safe space because we don't like rebuke. We don't like rebuke because we think rebuke is personal. And we think it's here to harm us. And rebuke maybe does harm you if it's not coming from a place of love, right? But in a loving, in a place of peace, in a place of love, you have to have the rebuke. Otherwise, it's not true love. It's just artificial.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question? As far as the Abraham's character, because he represents Hesed, right? But Hesed cannot be just pure Hesed. It has to have some Gevura in it. It's not Tiferet yet. It's not definitely not clear Gevura. But is that test kind of leads Abraham to develop some Gevura in his Hesed and prepare him for the next test?
Yes. So this entire parsha, the evolution of this entire parsha, if you look at last parsha, you look at Abraham in the beginning, the last two portions is basically testing Abraham, testing as in developing Abraham. Abraham is pure kindness. And pure kindness, everyone has to have pure kindness in their heart. And everybody does, right? Because according to the Kabbalah, the patriarchs are our patriarchs, not just because they're our ancestors, because they bequeath us their spiritual essence. And therefore, in everybody's soul, we have the attribute of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is the attributes of kindness, of discipline, and of compassion, which is the fusion of the two. But in Abraham's life, Abraham is primarily compassion, primarily kindness. Okay? Even in this parsha, the final page, he plants an Eshel in Be'er Sheva, he plants an orchard in Be'er Sheva, and he's basically giving free food to people for many years. So Abraham is the epitome of kindness. The problem with the epitome of kindness is, without getting into too much details here, that in the world of chaos, you can have absolute and extreme emotions. You can have just kindness. In the world of order, the world we live in, it doesn't work that way. Every emotion also has to be balanced. You need balance because absolute kindness in this world is not going to allow you to thrive. So Abraham has to express. I'm willing to debate this in a few minutes. Abraham is going to have some degree of discipline. And a lot of the stories in last week's parsha and this week's parsha is Abraham is forced to go and express strength. And to him, that's a test to him that's most difficult. That's difficult. Okay. Seth disagrees with me, but I want to discuss it with you at 10:30. But because people are waiting here, but because I have the mic, I'm going to be able to say what I want to say, and that is after the test of Isaac, test of the binding of Isaac. God says, by the way, don't kill your son. Don't kill your son. Why not? It was been a test. Now I know that you love me. Right? What an inspiring verse. Now that you know that you love me. Now I know that you love me. You're willing to sacrifice your son for me. Right? What a wonderful verse. But I'm tricking you. That's not what the verse says. The verse does not say, now I know that you love me. Why? That you love me. I knew that 25 years ago, or really decades ago. What does the verse say? Now I know that you fear me. Ata yadaiti. Now I know ki yirei elikimata. Now I know that you are God-fearing man. And that's why Seth says, why is that the first time it says the word test? Because the ultimate test is for Abraham not to express his love to God. Abraham is love. Of course he loves God, right? So now there's different degrees of love to God. What the Akedah is going to do is to see, do you have awe of God? Awe of God for somebody like Abraham is unnatural. Because it's unnatural, that's the test. For Isaac, awe of God is not unnatural. That's why that's his nature. And that's why that's one of the answers. Why isn't it a test for Isaac? The answer is Isaac is afraid of God to begin with. That's his nature. Serving God is not just using my nature in the service of God, but it's transcending myself. So that's why I jumped ahead. I wasn't going to say it, but I guess I couldn't hold myself back. That's why the beautiful verse that it said, that Shakeda should have said, now I know that you love me, that verse doesn't exist in the Torah. Why not? Because we always knew that wasn't at stake. What's at stake is, could you develop an emotion that's unnatural to you?
But isn't child a demonstration of love to Hashem?
No. Of love? No.
And discipline to your child.
Love would not do this. Love would not do this. You have to suppress yourself. Love is about self-expression. Avram's love.
Giving your child to Hashem.
It's not love. First of all, we can discuss this psychologically. But we agree about the end result, right? The agreed result that God says, now I know that you fear me, right? Even if you look at the binding of Isaac, the way we say it in the prayer, which I read last week, Avram kavash rachamav. He held back his natural compassion. Somebody who's loving cannot do it. Love. You can't kill I can't kill someone out of love. It doesn't. The character, the person who could kill their own child is not a person who is kind and loving. That's not the character. Forget about who I love. It's not the character of someone who can do that. To do that, to be prepared to kill your own child, you have to suppress the character of kindness and love, and you have to bring out the strength to go against your own natural habit. Now, again, I'm not talking about who I love. There's two things: who I love God, love my child. Which one comes first? It's a different question. But that's the character is the loving person, the kind, soft, loving person. That character cannot do the Akedah, cannot be prepared,
So
cannot do it.
Akiva sacrificed his life. Was that out of love to Hashem, or is that fear?
That's love to Hashem, but we're talking about what character trait. Rabbi Akiva, what character trait? Sacrificing yourself is not as hard as sacrificing your child, of course. But we're talking about what personality trait. I'm not talking about who I love and how I love and why I love. What character trait is necessary at that moment? So that is not love, which is expression of self, but it's awe and discipline, which is in some ways suppressing my natural love and forcing myself to do something against my nature.
Isn't that
Seth, go ahead on a second. Go ahead. No, she doesn't see that you're here. Go.
Moses stuck up to the Jewish people and was willing to walk away from God to stand up to the Jewish people. So this doesn't make sense.
Right.
This is exactly the opposite
Right.
of what God
That's a good question.
expected Moses.
That's a good question. We're going to get to that when we read the next story. It's a good question. How come? Yeah, because you want the drama. Some people want drama. I want the boring details for today. Come back. I want you to come back next week. So I say,
don't believe this.
okay, we can talk about that.
I don't know why.
Everything's up for debate. Go ahead, Vicky. Please ask your question, and then I'm going to try to finish the story. Go ahead. We have 7 minutes left. Go ahead, Vicky.
Well, it is not a question. It's just to support your point and my earlier question that there is no pure kindness in this world anymore because it's a world of order, and that's what we do. My question actually is, isn't that what we do when we count the Omer? We actually celebrate each shade of kindness, which is pure of kindness is one of them. So that kind of prepares us to survive in this world.
Yeah. So what do I mean? What do I mean when I say there's no absolute kindness? It means not that I'm not kind of feeling. It means that absolute kindness is not kindness. That's what it means. Not that there's no absolute kindness. Absolute kindness is not kindness. If my child is crying because they want a knife or they want too much candy, right? And I say, I'm so kind, I'm so giving, I'm going to let you have what you want. That's absolute kindness. That's not kindness. Disciplining your child is kindness. Okay,
that's absolute kindness.
Oh, when I say absolute kindness, I mean extreme kindness. In other words, kindness requires strength. Kindness requires telling your children no. And if you're a kind person, telling your child no is very painful and doesn't feel kind. But that's the idea. The idea is that in this world, extreme kindness, in other words, just kindness, just absolute kindness is not kindness. Absolute kindness is cruelty. Like the sages say, if somebody is kind to cruel people, that's not kindness, right? So the point here is, not that there's no, it's semantics. It's redefining kindness. But the point here is that in this world, if you just have just kindness, have no other tool, I have no ability to say no, I only have the ability to say yes, right? That's what I mean, absolute kindness, absolute giving, just giving and just expressing without the ability to discipline. That's in this world, that's chaos. And that's in this world, in any world, that ultimately that doesn't work. You have to, if you love somebody, this is the story. You love somebody, you have to be able to rebuke them. And Seth is right. That's what kindness is. Yes, it is. But the kindness requires rebuke. Okay, I want to read the Medrash. The Medrash says, bad idea that he made peace. Says the Medrash like this. The Medrash says like this, a very sad Medrash. I don't want to read it, ruin your Sunday morning, but I'll do it anyway. Avram took sheep and gave it to Abimelech. Says Abimelech to Avram, what are these sheep? Says God to Abraham, you gave 7 sheep against my will. I promise that I'm going to delay the joy of your children for 7 generations. In other words, the Jewish people are not going to ultimately build the temple and get our peace from the Philistines until the times of Solomon for 7 generations. You gave 7, and it goes on and on and on. You gave 7 sheep against my will. Their descendants are going to kill 7 of your righteous children. Chafni, Pinchas, Samson, Saul, and Saul's 3 sons. You gave 7 sheep. They're going to destroy, the Philistines are going to destroy 7 of, not just the Philistines, but the enemies of the Jews are going to destroy 7 of the temples. The Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, and the Gilgal Nov, Givon, Shiloh, and the 2 temples. You gave 7 sheep. Therefore, the ark in the book of Samuel was taken to the Philistines for 7 months. 7. All I'm trying to say here is clearly, whether or not you accept every detail here of the Medrash, clearly the Medrash says, bad idea. God promised you the land. Don't make a treaty with somebody else saying that you're going to let them live here in peace. And maybe the Medrash is saying that's the critique of Abraham. He's being too nice to Abimelech. You can make a commitment now that you're not going to harm Abimelech's children because you want to be a nice guy. If God says it's your land.
Did he send Ishmael away before all this?
Yeah.
And what about Isaac?
Isaac is after. So this is in the middle.
But Ishmael is sent away before.
Yes.
So is it possible?
Yes.
That
it's possible. Go ahead. Go ahead. The answer is yes, but go ahead.
Is it possible that Abraham lost faith in Hashem because he was asked to send Ishmael away, and then he decided, well, I'm going to take control.
Okay.
I'm going to make this deal with Abimelech,
and that's a loss of faith. Very good. Could be.
At that.
And a test of, and maybe the binding of Isaac is sort of a rebuke to the peace treaty. Okay, so there's different ways of reading this. Again, I'm not here to tell you how to read this, but I'm here hopefully to raise the questions that the sages have asked over the years.
I don't believe God is like that. I'm just such a different understanding.
That's why we're here. We're here to put out the different thing. And why am I saying this? I wasn't gonna say this Medrash, even though I copied it. So obviously, if I copied it into my notes, obviously I said this is interesting. But just because it's interesting doesn't mean you have to say it. No, I said it. But Amy says, he read the history, you know that the Philistines caused tremendous amount of trouble to the Jews for hundreds of years after this, until the days of David. So what is this beautiful peace treaty in the beginning of the story? We read it every Rosh Hashanah. Wonderful, we should all make peace. Well, what happened to this peace treaty? Okay.
Well, it's interesting too, as to what resolved the issue. It's David and Goliath.
Right.
Which is a show of
Yes,
strength.
yes. Now, I want to say one more point, a very funny point. Not funny. Nothing here is funny, serious, but it's amusing. Avraham comes to Pichol comes to Avraham. He says, make a peace treaty, and make a peace treaty that you are going to be kind to me, my children and grandchildren. At least that I could say Nini is great grandchild and great great grandchild. Okay, so he's saying only 3 expressions because he wants Abraham to think it's only 3 generations, but he's really throwing in another 2 or 3 under the radar by starting with my great-grandchild, right? So it could be getting it to 7. But then what is he giving in return? Is he saying my children will do the same? Of course not. Why not? Because you come to Abimelech and say, do me a favor. Please make an oath on behalf of my children. You know what Abimelech will say? My children are not going to listen to me. What I do is not binding on my children. Say some of the commentaries, Sham Shinfal here says, I think as he says it, he says, what does this tell you about Abimelech's understanding of Avram's ability to raise children with his morals and to be able to pass on his own legacy?
What does it say?
It says that he believes that if you make a treaty with Avram's descendants are going to keep that treaty. That's why he tells Abraham, do me a favor, make a treaty for me, children, make a treaty, and that your descendants, he doesn't say your descendants, but Avram will be dead. So it means his descendants will be loyal to me, to my child, to my grandchild, and maybe even further, depending on how you read that. Grandchild, Abraham's grandchildren, Avram should make a promise that his grandchildren will be nice to Abimelech's grandchildren. What do you want from Abraham? Go speak to the unborn grandchildren. Remember, Isaac is a few decades old. Isaac is not even married yet. Talking about grandchildren. So that means it's a testament to Abimelech's understanding that Abraham has the ability to raise children with his morals and with his his legacy. And of course, he was right, because Abraham he was able to do it to 4,000 years later. Right? Give us the power of the Jewish people to pass the tradition on to their children. But Abimelech makes no such counterclaim. Abimelech doesn't say, and I therefore will be loyal to you. So what do you have? You have an imbalance where Abraham is bound by the promise Abraham is bound by the promise to the Philistines, and they're not bound by the promise to him. Now, what happens is going to happen is that there's a whole story in the book of Samuel, or is it the book of Samuel, where when Abraham wants to conquer Jerusalem, when David wants to conquer Jerusalem, he has a problem with the Philistines who say that the oath was binding and he can't conquer them. And there's a whole story where he tells Yoav his thing that it's not a true treaty. The treaty is not binding anymore. It has passed, but he gets him to remove the symbols of that treaty. The bottom line is, this was an issue. This lasted for hundreds of years, and this delayed, by some accounts, the conquest. So that's a good question. Should he or should he have not? There's multiple opinions. It seems like the Medrash is not happy. Now, it's not just Abraham, because there'll be a repetition. If you look later ahead in Genesis chapter 26, page 133, the next generation, there is also another treaty between Abimelech and Pichol, the same 2 people, and Isaac. Because same story happens again, and it's not clear it's the same. It's not clear that it's the same. It's the same Abimelech, because Abimelech was the name not of the person but of the position. Just like every pharaoh, every king of Egypt was a pharaoh, every king of the Philistines was Abimelech. But in any case, he says again, so Isaac reiterates that oath. Again, the sages disagree. At least there's some opinions that say that this was a problem, and this is going to delay the entrance into the land.
Maybe Hashem was saying, by making him give up Isaac, listen, you made a thing for your kids, but anything can happen to your kids.
Right.
And that's not.
Yeah. So in other words, this was a problem. Avram binding his children with a commitment that he may have, should not have. But again, that's the matter. Rashi doesn't say this. There's no reason to assume. In other words, it's possible to assume that you're coming and you're making an agreement. It's what's wrong with the treaty. It sounds practical, but again,
God guide Abraham?
No. God, there's no indication. When it comes to sending away his son, God says, do what Sarah says. When it comes to binding of Isaac, God says, bind Isaac. Treaty, God doesn't tell you everything. You have to use your own intuition. And again, like I said, at least the Medrash thinks that you want to make a treaty, but to make a long-term treaty when God promised you the land is at least at a minimum problematic. So yeah, I'm just telling you there's multiple ways of doing this. That's what I'm saying.
Especially if Abraham was skeptical about Abimelech's power over his descendants, because otherwise he would have probably asked him to do the same.
Yeah, there's no claim. Abraham doesn't think, Yeah, it's a one-way, in other words.
About his abilities to begin with, and that's probably Medrash is not happy about the
Right. So it's not,
enough.
you're giving more than you're getting. Right.
Right.
What is Rashi saying in 23?
Verse 23.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to go back here. 23. Then the Talmud assumes that you care about three generations of children, not beyond that. Why didn't he stop? Why does he stop? So he says child and grandchild. So the simple interpretation is, says Rashi, the compassion of father and a son is to 4 generations. If I tell you 10 generations down, your descendants are going to have to fight with the Philistines. Okay.
Maybe he wouldn't have made the deal.
Maybe he wouldn't make the deal, but maybe he wouldn't make the deal. But Rashi says that for 3 generations, you're concerned. After that, you're less concerned. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is a story in short. You see what happened. We started out with a story that looked very just technical. Happened to be Abraham was walking down the street and someone came and said, let's make a deal. And they made seven sheep and they happened to name the city Beersheba and everything is fine. And let's move on quickly to the next story. But when you read it carefully, you see that it's not a simple story. How do you negotiate with your neighbors? Do you project strength for peace? Do you rebuke for love? Or do you rebuke for peace? Or the other side is maybe you were too kind and maybe you made a treaty that you shouldn't have made. So we don't have all the answers, but at least these are the questions that this story raises. I hope you enjoyed. Hope to see you next week in good health. And maybe even we'll be able, we're going to have to finish this portion. And then we're going to get to Seth's favorite portion, which is the binding of Isaac. At least in this parsha, favorite in this parsha. Yes, so they related. Yes.
And Rabbi, I just wanted to say, I think I'll speak for myself. I'm happy to study in the merit of the Jews of Ukraine.
Yes.
Of all the people.
Indeed. Okay, we should hear good news and only good things. Wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rabbi.